Is this on? Yes, it is.
Rudy's Revelation.
Google me, bitch! Google me!
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. It is July 8th, Wednesday. Hey, everyone. So, there's a lot to cover today. So, I'm going to get right into it. We're basically going to talk about Joe Biden again and what's going to happen with him. It doesn't look good necessarily, but we'll take a good look at it and see and we're going to talk about what's going to happen to him. He's obviously not going to serve another 4 years, even if he's elected, which I doubt he will be. Most Democrats doubt that as well. So something's going to happen to him between now and September. And we're going to talk about what it is, but let's get right into the headlines on this Wednesday, July 10th. All right, first up, Perry and I talked about this last night. This is a New York Times article. Parkinson's expert visited the White House 8 times in 8 months. The White House said President Biden had met with a neurologist only 3 times in more than 3 years in office and implied that the doctor's visits were related to treating other people. Now, if you went down through this article, you could see that they try to muddy the waters with the whole Parkinson's expert accusations that President Biden is suffering from Parkinson's disease, which is a neurodegenerative disease. And a lot of people, a lot of doctors, even experts in this field who just witnessed Biden from video say he is showing signs of neurodegenerative disease, maybe not Parkinson's, but another disease. But the deal with this article is that they muddy the waters and say, well, this Parkinson's expert has visited the White House through many administrations. They don't have any record for Trump's administration, but he was there many times for Bush and for Obama, what have you. And that he was mostly there to treat migraines with Botox. But people are still very skeptical. And even though they're trying to muddy the waters here, the New York Times article goes on to say that an array of neurologists who have not personally examined Mr. Biden say they observed symptoms in his public appearances that were consistent with Parkinson's or a related disease, such as hypophonic speech, forward flexed posture, a shuffling gait, masked face, which we all have seen this, and irregular speech pattern, but they emphasize that a specific diagnosis could not be given without a first-hand examination. So everybody, including Dr. Siegel on Fox News, they've all seen the displays of Biden's physical health and say he's suffering. The White House tried to explain this away by first saying he has a stutter, and then he's not getting enough sleep, and then he's had jet lag, and then he's got a cold, and so they're making a lot of different excuses. And now with reports of this neurologist showing up at the White House many times, now they're going again to another excuse, which is always the thing from the left, plausible deniability, which is any kind of lie that will cover up what's really happening. Now, I talked about this yesterday about will the electorate understand whether they've had the wool pulled over their eyes in regards to Joe Biden as being elected, first of all, whether he was fairly elected, or whether they've been hiding his physical condition for more than 4 years. It's harder to hide it now because he's getting worse. And so now it's just not on a rare public appearance. Now it's every public appearance. And even when he spoke at NATO yesterday, he got through it pretty well for about 10 minutes. It was only about a 15-minute speech. And then toward the end, he started slurring words together. And then he practically, well, he did, but only partially read from the teleprompter stage direction. So going on to another article here from the New York Post, Parkinson's doctor suggests Biden has classic features of neurodegeneration after Revelation specialist visited the White House 8 times. Now, this was from NBC News, actually on television, but the Post article goes on to say a New York-based neurologist who specializes in treating Parkinson's disease suggested Monday that President Biden is exhibiting classic features of neurodegeneration as speculation swirls about his political future. Dr. Tom Pitts made his assessment based on Biden's public appearances while the White House faced questions on why another Parkinson's expert visited the executive mansion 8 times in an 8-month stretch last year and early this year. I could have diagnosed him from across the mall, Pitts told NBC News Now's top story with Tom Lamas. So here's another Parkinson's doctor who said, I could have diagnosed him from across the mall. And the New York Times article also stated that many Parkinson's experts looking at Biden's behavior could say he's suffering from neurodegenerative disease. Now, do they have, he's getting the best medication, so they have medication to lessen the symptoms, and it probably only lasts for a certain time. Like I said, I'm sure they also give him Adderall or other amphetamines, but that could exacerbate his condition as well. So it's a mix of cocktails. I'm sure they're giving him vitamin B and whatnot to stimulate him, but it seems it lasts less and less time. Even during his State of the Union speech where people said that was flawless, it was really about 20 minutes in where he started again slurring words and confusing words that he was reading from the teleprompter. Another article here from the New York Post, George Stephanopoulos, Snuffleupagus, that was my, to be honest with you, that's all over the internet now, and even Fox is using the Snuffleupagus that I've been using since the Clinton administration in referring to George Stephanopoulos, who was Bill Clinton's chief of staff and is now a journalist. Anyway, going back to the New York Post article, George Stephanopoulos says, I don't think Biden can serve 4 more years after the ABC interview. Now, what did he know? He was there during the taping of the interview, obviously, which I speculate probably took a couple hours, probably over an hour at the very least, 3 hours at the most, to put together 20 minutes of what seemed like cogent responses from President Biden. But since George Stephanopoulos said that, he probably witnessed something that we didn't witness from the interview, and that was probably take after take after take to try to get the interview right and looking the way the White House wanted it to look. And I'm sure it was on conditions from the White House, including giving Stephanopoulos the questions and having prepared answers. And it might very likely have been a teleprompter behind Stephanopoulos, aides in the room coaching him, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a contrived incident or a contrived interview, to say the least, but he obviously witnessed that. We still need to see her videotapes or audio tapes, the full, because the transcript was amended several times, and we need to see how he functioned during that interview. Going on to other headlines, we had a bunch to get through, so I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible. The Associated Press, chaos swirling since Biden's debate flub is causing cracks in a White House known for discipline. Perhaps. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre reflected Tuesday on the extraordinary moment for the president and his team. Questions about the 81-year-old's age and mental capacity threatened to torpedo his re-election dreams. Shaky, they talk about his shaky June 27th debate performance, and the fact that Hunter Biden's presence in the White House has alarmed some, prompted current White House officials to anonymously vent their concerns about Biden's ability to do the job, and even led to the departure of radio journalists after details emerged that the Biden campaign had fed her and other reporters questions. But the article goes on to say, at Camp David, the weekend after the debate, the Biden family, and particularly Hunter Biden and the first lady, Jill Biden, encouraged the president to stay in the race and questioned whether his staff had prepared him properly. Well, they know that what his shortcomings are. Or maybe they didn't prepare him properly. My thing is that it seemed to be a bit of a setup, so maybe that's what the family was concerned about. But set up, not like they drugged him to make him seem stupid, but set up because they probably didn't juice him up like they usually do. And they argued for the rules of the debate, which were not going to favor Joe Biden. In any case, the article goes on to say long after the president's Hunter Biden, awaiting sentencing on 3 felony convictions in a gun case, which we'll get to later, at the White House was unsettling to some people who were worried about his influence on his father because he is a crack addict. According to 2 Democrats close to the White House who spoke on the condition of anonymity, of course, and there's a second guessing over the long-term strategy to limit the Biden's public interactions, especially with journalists, under a mandate led by senior aides. Biden has granted fewer interviews than his modern predecessors and held even fewer news conferences than Ronald Reagan, the fewest since Ronald Reagan, and especially because Ronald Reagan's second term, he was showing signs of age and loss of mental acuity as well in his later years. But that was after he was reelected to a second term. But in any case, the reason Biden doesn't hold news conferences is because he's senile and he can't answer questions. He has to have them all written down, and the questions have to be prepared. And just like when he reads the teleprompter, he can't think on his feet, which means he can't really think. So going back to the headlines here on Capitol Hill, Democrats panic about Biden but do nothing. They can't really do anything. The president has yet to do what many Democrats said he must show. He is up to remaining in the race, but so far they have thrown up their hands and do nothing to nudge him aside because there's nothing they can do. One of the reasons I brought up this article is because my Senator Chris Murphy, an ambitious young gun-grabbing Democrat from Connecticut, went on television on Sunday with a carefully worded warning to President Biden about the viability of his campaign. This week is absolutely crucial. I think the president needs to do more. The clock is ticking. And multiple times, Mr. Murphy emphasized his deadline, saying that he, as well as voters, must see more action this week. And that's what keeps me alluding to the fact is that, because a lot of these people like Chris Murphy are closely connected to the intelligence agencies. I think he's a construct, an intelligence agency construct, but that's beside the point. That the clock is ticking for Biden to do something, or the administration to do something, and they laid this out. They knew this a long time ago. That's why they put the debate in June, the earliest a presidential debate has ever been, is to test Joe Biden. Biden failed the test. They wanted him to fail the test. Now the intelligence agencies have started the clock ticking, and if he does not step aside, which I doubt he will do, he will be removed one way or another. There are many avenues. So, and Perry and I talked about that last night on episode 82 of Tuesdays with Perry, so you should check that out. Going back to the stories here, the Wall Street Journal, Democrats' effort to push Biden off the ticket hits uncertainty. Right now, President Biden is the nominee, and we support the Democratic nominee, says a top House Democrat. That is indeed the case. There's nothing they can do about it. The only people that have the power to remove him is the intelligence agencies, and his cabinet, which could 25th Amendment him, which they should. I don't know really what they're waiting for, but if they do that, that will limit the chances of the Democrats winning. So there are other more successful paths that they're very likely to take. Other national news here, if you didn't hear, this is from One American News. Nikki Haley releases her delegates to support Trump. And Reuters, Trump foreign policy advisor meets with European officials attending NATO summit. Several high-ranking European officials have met with top foreign official advisor to Donald Trump. But these advisors say, I'm not connected with the campaign, but they are high-ranking advisors to Donald Trump. Keith Kellogg, a retired lieutenant general who served as chief of staff to Trump's National Security Council, told Reuters he has met several European officials in recent days, including foreign ministers. He did not disclose the identities of those foreign officials. And he went on to say, the story goes on to say the foreign officials are hungry for information they could glean about Trump's foreign policy in the event he beats Democrat President Joe Biden in November. Moving on to other Reuters articles here, U.S. House to vote on Trump-backed bill targeting non-citizens voting. And we've heard about this before. The Republican-controlled House of Representatives plans to vote on Wednesday on a bill banning non-citizens from voting in the election. Mike Johnson said that many Democrats want all these illegals to participate in our federal elections. They want them to vote. And that is clearly indicated by states, Democratic states that are controlled by a supermajority of Democrats, are pushing through legislation to allow illegal immigrants to vote in state and municipal elections. Going back to the Bidens here, this is New York Post. Hunter Biden withdraws bid for new gun trial case after feds blast him for failure to read orders. The judge said misunderstanding of the appellate practice and failure to read prior court orders because he put forth what is known as a mandate and basically said the Delaware federal judge, Marianne Noliorka, didn't have jurisdiction over the trial, but the current judge said both dismissal orders are plainly stamped issue in lieu of mandate and provide no basis for this court to reconsider its earlier rulings with respect to jurisdiction when a non-appeal orders are appealed. So basically, they said he had no grounds to appeal and that his appeal, nonetheless, had no grounds. So he withdrew his appeal. And why is that not surprising that he's guilty? And because of his laptop, there's plenty of evidence to show that he was addicted to cocaine at the time that he bought the gun. Other news from BBC, U.S. officials uncover alleged Russian bot farm. Stay with me now. We see how this is shaping up because this is only reported in the British press, really. I looked other places domestically. I didn't really find it. But U.S. officials uncover alleged Russian bot farm. They are going to push the Russian narrative once again if Trump wins. He was helped by Russia and that he did not win legitimately, and that, like they said in 2016, he's an illegitimate president because of Russian bot farms, and they didn't really go into how extensive. They weren't very extensive at all. It's like when they finally issued the Mueller report, they found that there were 2 Facebook pages linked to Russians that wasn't even the Russian state that were involved politically. Other news from Al Jazeera, Russia blames war on NATO as it pounds Ukraine, demands territory for talks. If you didn't know also that Hungarian President Viktor Orban and actually Indian Prime Minister Modi was recently in Russia shoring up the BRICS alliance because the I in BRICS stands for India, by the way, if you didn't know. And the West is all in a flutter about, oh, India. You know, India has allied itself with the East, China and Russia, as well as Brazil and other countries, South Africa. In any case, back to this article. Hungarian President Viktor Orban had visited Russia, and he is trying to talk to Vladimir Putin to get a peace deal going while NATO rattles its sabers. But the article says, as soon as Kiev declares that they are ready for such a decision and begin a real withdrawal of troops from these regions, meaning the Donetsk, as well as officially notify of the rejection of plans to join NATO from our side immediately, literally, and at the same moment, the order will be followed by a ceasefire and start of negotiations. So basically, the Russians are saying, you can't have Donetsk. That was the whole point of the invasion, is create a buffer zone against NATO, and that to secure their national security or their strategic security of Sevastopol, where their Black Sea fleet is based, which is inside Crimea, that's why holding Crimea is essential. You can't have NATO in Crimea, which is literally 5 miles away from Sevastopol. So if we could have, like Trump said, we could have peace immediately if we are willing to negotiate with Russia, which we're not, or to even understand Russia's strategic interests, which we are not. That's the whole point. And it's NATO's 75th anniversary, but the point is, during the summit, was there any talk of changing the mission statement of NATO, which is a bulwark against Russian aggression, which basically means to undermine Russian aggression, means to attack Russia or undermine Russia's defenses in any way. Other news from Newsweek: Russia foils assassination attempt on senior military officers. There's nothing really to say about this. The article goes on to say Russia said it has thwarted an assassination attempt on 3 of its high-ranking military officers. Many of its high-ranking military officers have been assassinated. So the fact that it thwarted 3 more attempts shouldn't be surprising. What are the Russians actually killing their own generals? You know, the reality is it's the CIA and Western Intelligence Club of Bern using, through Ukraine are launching war and subversion tactics, including assassinations inside of Russia. The war has started against Russia. They're shooting. I don't think I included the BBC article, which said the new prime minister now has agreed to send long-range missiles into Ukraine with permission to fire deep inside Russia. All these things are provocations into a wider war. And then we condemn Russia for wanting to work with their allies to supply weaponry. How can the West and NATO supply weaponry, advanced weaponry to Ukraine, long-range weaponry, but Russia can't ally with other countries to have them supply weapons and technology? Russian Internal Security and Counterintelligence Service, the FSB, said a suspect was arrested for allegedly planning to deliver 3 explosive devices to officers in the defense ministry. It alleged that the attempted killings were on behalf of the Ukrainian military intelligence, CIA. More news from Newsweek. North Korea issues new war warning against U.S. and ally. Relations between the Koreas are at most unstable in decades, with South Korea condemning Kim Jong-un's regime's spat of missile launches and Pyongyang accusing Seoul of provocative joint military exercise with the United States. What we should consider here also is when we talk about North Korea is the red-headed stepchild. It's a client state of the communist Chinese. It is, if the communist Chinese could have the type of communism North Korea has, they would, but it wouldn't work. It doesn't work in North Korea, and it wouldn't work in China because, well, it's extremely totalitarian. And it doesn't, when you have a totalitarian socialist regime in particular, the economy just doesn't work. and it's a closed society. So you can't, it's hard to work domestically, economics, primarily domestically only, closed to the outside world. But then with draconian measures, you know, you don't have any free market or anything. It's almost impossible. More news from the Associated Press. China and Bangladesh reaffirm their ties as territorial and economic issue rise in the region. What we know here is basically, and you will see, that the alliances are forming for a third world war. The BRICS is forming into more military alliance. And that's without saying. I mean, it's China, Russia, India, and most of the Asian countries. USA Today is reporting Iran is targeting Americans amid Gaza war protests. U.S. intelligence chiefs warn. Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence, said that opportunistically Iranians have inserted themselves in the protest movement via social media and other cyber activities, posing as activists online and promoting, even funding public demonstrations. I want to be clear. I know Americans can participate in protests in good faith, expressing their views, under the First Amendment, but you have to also understand that the Iranians are involved, and not just electronically, but I'm sure they have physical actors within the protests. And then going to some big news here. Modi bear hugs Putin in Moscow, marking deep ties between Russia and India. The Indian Prime Minister has been hosted by President Biden in a state dinner, lavish praise at the White House. One of the most consequential relationships, but this week Modi reminded the world that he has another close relationship with my dear friend Vladimir Putin, as Modi makes his first visit to Russia since 2022 invasion of Ukraine. And then it shows them, being very close and what have you. As I said before, India and Russia are part of BRICS. BRICS has become more than just an economic alliance. It's becoming more and more strategic alliance. And I'm going to go into that even more so here because Saudi Arabia is warming up to BRICS. And I've covered this before as well. Bloomberg is reporting Saudis warn G7 over Russian seizures with debt sale threat. Now, if you don't know what debt sale threat is, I'm going to get into that in just a minute. But so we have national debt. Well, who owns our debt? Well, yeah, the Chinese own some, but also the Japanese own a lot. And that comes from buying U.S. Treasury bonds. And so what they can do is they can threaten the economy of the debtors by selling off their bonds. So that's exactly what the Saudis are threatening. Saudi Arabia private hinted earlier this year it might sell off some of European debt holdings if the group of seven decided to seize almost $300 billion of Russia's foreign frozen assets. The kingdom's finance ministry told some of the G7 counterparts of its opposition of the idea, which was meant to support Ukraine. In May and June, G7 was exploring different options regarding the Russian central bank funds. So there you go. That's really an act of economic warfare that the Saudis are against. And I just want to remind people, if you haven't read the book of Revelations in the Bible, and even if you're not a Christian, or it doesn't matter, everybody should be familiar with religious texts, particularly the Bible. But in the Revelation, it talks about the beast with 7 heads and diadems upon those 7 heads, which means riches. So that represents the G7. There's no other ifs, ands, or buts about it. And they even talk about one head being cut off and then growing back later, and that refers to Russia, but I'm not going to digress into religious, religious text and basically what it means or what it doesn't mean, the interpretation of these texts. BBC is reporting police to roll out live facial recognition cameras. Now, this is really important to understand because what happens in Europe first in the socialist countries is coming here, without a doubt. So Facial recognition is an invasion of privacy. Not only facial recognition, but all electronic surveillance of your person. Facial recognition being the most prevalent because not only can it read your face live in person through all the surveillance cameras, but now they're rolling out trucks to do it, but also surveillance of your license plate and also surveillance of your heat registry, or they have x-ray like they were trying in New York to see if you have weapons. So any kind of surveillance of your person is a violation of the Fourth Amendment because we should be able to vote on that. But the United Kingdom does not have the Constitution, does not have the Bill of Rights. Rights for individuals. The Associated Press reports California fast food workers now earn $20 per hour, but franchisors are responding by cutting hours. Why is this a surprise? Not a surprise whatsoever. What you have to understand is that we knew this was going to happen. This is called economics. When you raise wages outside of what the market dictates, you're going to get a response by business, by the person paying the wage. So, because it has to do with profit margin. And in publicly traded companies, you have the people that earn the dividends, the actual owners of the company, are going to tell the chairman of the board and the board, you have to take action to increase dividends. So if workers' pay is cutting into the dividends, well, of the people that own the company, and the reason they own the company, invest in the company, is because they want the dividend. That's the whole point of investing. You want a return on your investment. Whether you buy a rental home or whatever you invest in, gold or stocks or whatever, you want the dividend because you're putting your money into something. Even if you put it into a savings account, there's a return. There's an interest rate of return, whether it's 3 or 4% or what have you. So these people who own fast food chains, McDonald's or whatever, want their dividends. So if the state, demands that you have to pay the people more, well, they're just going to cut hours, or they're going to cut quality. They're going to do something, or what's going to happen is they're going to automate and get rid of the workers entirely. So all that California did is force the technocracy to do what they want to do anyway, is replace humans. There's a little bit of news about COVID. I hope I could say that and that I don't get a strike on YouTube. But in any case, I won't talk too much about it. You could read into it. Mini strokes, gut problems. Scientists see links to an old bout of COVID. Feeling ill, the cause might be years old. And so the Wall Street Journal is saying that a certain disease, a certain virus could cause, and I always said it was a two-vector attack on you. One could be a certain medical procedure, another could be a virus. Them together could cause problems. We don't know which is which, but you never know. I'm not speculating, but apparently since the pandemic, there has been an increase, I should say a decrease of an increase in morbidity and actually mortality. The life expectancy is starting to edge down. But since COVID, people are having a lot of health problems. And the Wall Street Journal article is pointing that out. Mini strokes, gut problems, on and on and on. So I hope YouTube doesn't get all upset that I mentioned a Wall Street Journal article that says scientists, trust the science, see links to an old bout of COVID if you're having health problems today. So more health news. Daily Express. CDC issues urgent dengue fever warning as 41 travelers in New Jersey are infected. So that's what we're seeing is dengue fever. They're trying to scare you a little bit with that. The CDC has issued an urgent dengue fever warning. But it's 41 travelers, so it's not, they said there's been no locally transmitted in the state, but the problem is these people with dengue are bit by mosquitoes, those mosquitoes can go on to infect other people. So the more cases you have in the country, and if they're not, discovered quickly, those people can be bitten by mosquitoes, and those mosquitoes can infect other people. Well, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click that notification bell. Give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Engage the channel, please. Also, don't forget you're under attack psychologically and biologically. So stay hip to the trick. And join me live every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on Rumble. You can also find me on social media, X, Getter, Minds, Facebook. I'm also on BetShoot, and you can find the audio podcast on YouTube. It's ingested there. I already have one strike, so I have to tamp down my speech on anything COVID related, so I don't want to make any false medical claims to get me another strike there. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. Join me tomorrow, 10 a.m. Respect.
Google me, bitch! Google me!
Rudy's Revelation.
This is all a conspiracy. Don't you know that it's a conspiracy there?
Is this on? Yes, it is.